Hello, friends. Welcome to the second part of 1996, the year in fighting games. First, we'll be taking a look at Namco's efforts for the year. Then, we will take a gander over at Mortal Kombat. Then, after that, we'll be looking at SNK and the output on the Neo Geo. Lastly, we'll be taking a look at Tecmo's first button basher in Dead or Alive, and the historically relevant and terrible Battle Arena Toshinden. If you want me to keep doing this series, please like and subscribe. These are a ton of work, so if you enjoy them, let me know in the comments. Without further ado, let's get started. Tekken 2. Since we spent so much time on Tekken 2 in 1995 on its arcade release, I don't want to spend a ton of time rehashing what was already discussed. But suffice to say, Tekken 2 came out on PlayStation in 1996 and was a gargantuan hit, moving over 5 million copies, shattering the previous Tekken's record of 1 million. Tekken 2 is the official arrival of Tekken as a blockbuster franchise, but we would have to wait one more year before we got to see the best King of Iron Fist for the original PlayStation. Winner, bestseller of the year.
Namco.
Soul Edge / Soul Blade. Here we have another weird one thanks to how Namco released its games. Soul Edge would originally come out in 1995 to the arcades. Then it would be brought home on the PlayStation the next year in 1996 in Japan, and then the following year in the rest of the world. Still, I thought it made the most sense to place the game here, as this would be the version most people would have played and remembered. One of the first ever games to introduce the sidestep, performed by double tapping the direction, as would later be added to Tekken. However, the sidestep here feels a bit on the stiff side. Certainly welcome, but not as fluid as Virtua Fighter 3, Fighters Mega Mix, or hell, even Sonic the Fighters. But the ability to do so at all is hugely appreciated. The gameplay is classic Soul Calibur. One button hits horizontal, one hits vertical, one button kicks, and one blocks. That's it. It's a simple and elegant system that works beautifully for sword fighting in a 3D space. The thing is, Soul Edge just doesn't feel as smooth or as nice as Soul Calibur. It's pretty clear that they were working out all of the kinks with this one through multiple releases and iterations of the same game. This would eventually result in the spectacular Soul Calibur. Even before I played Soul Calibur, this game always felt slightly on the clunky side, and just like it was missing that special something to keep me coming back to it. This game gets a lot right, but the core of it just isn't that fun at the moment. I know the sequels will go on to become some of the most addictive and polished 3D fighters ever, but we just aren't there yet. Mortal Kombat Trilogy. Growing up, I always remember this as the bad Mortal Kombat to Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3's nostalgic perfection. So we need to make a clarification from last year's video. Ultimate MK3 actually never came to the original PlayStation. Sega arranged a 32-bit exclusive for that version of the game. So until the Saturn, I had only played the arcade and SNES version of the game. One of my friends definitely had the original Mortal Kombat 3 for the PlayStation, so I guess I just mixed them up. This has been a Retro Remy PSA. Back to Mortal Kombat Trilogy. I think my friends and I would consider this the bad Mortal Kombat compared to the 16-bit Ultimate MK for a couple of reasons. When you look at the big board of Mortal Kombat releases, Mortal Kombat Trilogy is kind of an odd bird. It came out at the exact same time that Ultimate came out on the 16-bit consoles. It's also named like it's some kind of collection, but it isn't. It also isn't an update to MK3 and is more or less a completely different game. Having two games come out with different names in the same franchise at the same time is incredibly confusing, especially as they split Mortal Kombat 3 into two releases already. But I know that none of that really had anything to do with my childhood disdain. The biggest and most glaring are the insanely long and plentiful load times that feature in this game. Coming from the 16-bit versions of Mortal Kombat, it is impossible to not notice the numerous and lengthy load times that happen every match. But honestly, I think aside from the load times, MK Trilogy is a bit of a forgotten gem. It was sandwiched in between Mortal Kombat 3 and 4, without a number to its name. And I think because of that, mostly gets completely forgotten about. The Trilogy moniker makes it worse because it sounds like this is a collection of the first 3 games, but this is actually a compilation of all the content, mostly, from the first 3 games in one package. It is actually the last Mortal Kombat game to use the classic digitized assets, and at the time was criticized pretty heavily for it. This game has extremely mixed reviews, but in the context of Mortal Kombat fatigue being full-blown by 1996, it makes a lot of sense. Mortal Kombat Trilogy was the umpteenth Mortal Kombat game by 1996, and from a lot of critics' perspectives, didn't bring much new to the table. I actually don't think that this is true. For better or worse, the game is quite different than Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3. While it is still a 6-button game, 2-punch, 2-kick, run and block, and the chain combo system from Mortal Kombat 3 returns, the game feels completely different. For one thing, a lot of the cast has new moves or huge alterations to existing moves. My main man Jax is so different they included classic Mortal Kombat 2 Jax as well, and MK2 Jax seems to be super busted. That's the other thing about this game. It isn't what I would call particularly balanced. I think at a casual level that this game is great. But there are some truly nasty infinites in this game. Noob Saibot in particular has an infinite that can be done anywhere on the screen and results in the biggest of big boy damage. The N64 version is also less balanced than the Saturn or PlayStation versions of the game, since they literally couldn't fit all the frames of animations into the cartridge. This results in a few characters being totally absent and move properties being changed dramatically to match the new animations. You want the PlayStation or Saturn version of this game. The Saturn version was the last to come out and is also the most complete, including over 30 characters and allegedly every Mortal Kombat character that had appeared to date. Pretty insane accomplishment, all things considered. For those unaware, after MK2, there was a lot of backstage drama with the cast of the game regarding pay. This is the real reason Johnny Cage, Katana, and Raiden weren't in the original version of Mortal Kombat 3. But worry not, everyone is back and has been recast if they wouldn't play ball. Actors Ho Sung Pak, Liu Kang, Philip An, Shang Tsung, Elizabeth Malecki, Sonya Blade, Catalin Zamir, Katana Melina Jade, and Dan Pesina, Johnny Cage, Scorpion, Sub-Zero, Reptile, and Smoke, all left midway prior to the production of the game due to royalty disputes. Doesn't that just make you feel warm and fuzzy inside? As far as gameplay tweaks, the biggest is the addition of the aggressor bar. And I'm going to be honest, I think the aggressor meter is the laziest thing they could have possibly done to compete with the supers in Street Fighter and SNK games. Instead of the cast getting cool supers, the aggressor bar is essentially the burst meter from Samurai Showdown. When it is full, you do more damage and move faster. It also seems super unbalanced and really powerful. My understanding is that this meter generally gets turned off for competitive play, and Noob Saibot is banned. But why didn't this game replace Ultimate MK3 competitively? The line of competition really does go to MK3 to Mortal Kombat 9. Nothing else really gets played. I think the reason Mortal Kombat Trilogy gets snubbed was frankly it was the first Mortal Kombat game to not get an arcade version. The only way to play this game would have been on the PlayStation, the gimped N64 version, or the elusive and late Sega Saturn version. You could buy a whole new system to play this game on a worse controller compared to an arcade stick, or you could just play the arcade version of Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3. With this choice in mind, the Mortal Kombat scene just stuck with the arcade. Despite the bigger roster and stage selection of Trilogy, I think the lack of a definitive arcade release really hurts it competitively. But what about just playing it casually? I think casually, Mortal Kombat Trilogy truly shines. I think the ability to pick literally any classic Mortal Kombat character and mess around with them, and potentially they even have new moves, it's a great mix of new and nostalgic. If you're a Mortal Kombat fan and also remember this as the bad Mortal Kombat, then I suggest you give it a second look because there is a hell of a lot here to enjoy. Winner? best forgotten classic. King of Fighters, 1996. By 1996, SNK was not in very good shape financially. The Neo Geo hardware they had made their name on was frankly old by 1996, having come out in 1990. The board obviously had no polygonal capabilities, and SNK was just scrambling to try and keep up with Sega, Namco, and Capcom in the arcades. At home, the Neo Geo home console had never been particularly successful in the West or Japan due to its ludicrous asking price. In an attempt to remedy this, SNK would release the Neo Geo CD in 1994 and support it until 1997. The system would also prove to be unsuccessful in both the West and Japan due to a negative reputation for having long load times and still launching at a relatively beefy $400 in the United States. This was the barrel King of Fighters 1996 was staring down when it came out. King of Fighters was becoming a big annual franchise for the company, and they really couldn't afford to slip. Did they? No! But it wasn't an easy ride either. SNK members had various troubles with the development of the game as they were dragged on right up until its scheduled release. This happened since developers had difficulties making the sprites and special moves needed for the new characters for the game. Remember, these were the first big additions to King of Fighters, as King of Fighters 95 only added one new character to the game. The character roster underwent major changes since the previous game. The rival team was disbanded, with only Iori Yagami returning. New characters including Kasumi Toda from Art of Fighting 3, Leona, who joins the Ikari team in place of her mentor, Hyder, Mature and Vice, two of Vergil's assistants who join Iori Yagami as members of the new Yagami team, and the boss team composed of Geese Howard, Wolfgang Krauser, and Mr. Big. All villains from the Fatal Fury and Art of Fighting series. The new boss character is Gonitz, a servant from Orochi who wants to stop Chizuru's plan of sealing his master. Compared to King of Fighters 95, this is a gigantic upgrade to the roster, and we're starting to see some new faces like Mature and Vice, as well as some old favorites like Geese Howard. King of Fighters 96 makes radical changes to the gameplay of the two previous King of Fighters games by introducing new mechanics. The dodge mechanic from the previous two games has been replaced with an emergency evasion or attack deflector, which allows the player to roll away or towards the opponent. If you roll towards your opponent, the player has the opportunity to cross up their opponent. It's a bit like a cross between an alpha counter and a normal King of Fighters roll. This is the first game that introduced hops to the jump arsenal, giving the game a truly King of Fighters feel, not to mention the graphics for all the character sprites have been completely redrawn, and the commands for the more esoteric special and super moves have been changed from previous games to be more user-friendly. Super special moves can still be performed when the power gauge is filled up or when the player's life gauge is flashing red, but what's really cool is you can also perform more powerful versions of their supers if both conditions are met, meaning that you both have low energy and your power gauge is full. One of the other big changes to the gameplay is that you can now run, which is great for rushing down your opponents, plus the animation looks super cool. This would be a standard addition to KOF moving forward. I feel like I didn't give King of Fighters 95 enough respect. After diving deeper into the old King of Fighters scene, I have come to find out that all of these games are very much alive online. It helps a great deal if you can speak Spanish, but either way, they are absolutely still being played. That is a hell of an accomplishment and is a damn sight more than I can say for most of the games from 1996. This game was criticized by publications at the time for essentially being 2D, even with the beautiful redraws. It also criticized the balance of the roster among a bunch of other things that don't really hold water, like the properties of the projectiles. I feel like a lot of reviews of this era have absolutely no idea what they're talking about when it comes to fighting games. However, Electronic Gaming Monthly's editor did name King of Fighters 96 their Neo Geo Game of the Year, calling it an excellent package deal for any fan of 2D sprite-based fighting games. The game was the clear winner from SNK's financial perspective. In Japan, Game Machine listed the King of Fighters 1996 on their September 1996 issue as being the most successful arcade game of the month. According to Famitsu, the AES version of the game sold 330,000 copies in its first week on the market, which is pretty darn good when you factor in the insane prices we're talking about here. GameSpot noted the game helped start a modest resurgence in the sales of AES consoles and cartridges. During its release week, the Sega Saturn port of the game sold 100,000 copies in Japan as well. We aren't talking Tekken numbers here, but King of Fighters continued to be a modest success for SNK back in 1996, and literally was a key in keeping the lights on. That doesn't mean getting out a yearly update of this magnitude was easy. The development of King of Fighters 96 was a nightmare. At the location test, Mature and Vice were still not in the game, since the staff did not have enough time to completely design them, which is crazy. The King of Fighters 96 is the second game to break the technical limits of the Neo Geo by using a memory footprint of 362 megabits, which is roughly 46 megs. The proposed theoretical limit of game sizes prior to this was 330 megabits. Real Bout Fatal Fury, love you, which released in 1995, was the first game to break the 330 megabit barrier. King of Fighters 96 is really the whole package. Great gameplay updates from previous years, totally new sprites for everyone. See that, Capcom? You can do it too! Along with new characters that would go on to be series staples and old returning characters that everyone wanted in the first place, like Geese. King of Fighters 96 is the first King of Fighters I can recommend without any reservations. This is where everything was really starting to come together from a gameplay and story perspective. This section is already insanely long, but I recommend checking out a KOF story analysis at some point because, man, it is crazy. Winner, best fighter from 1996 to play today. King of Fighters 1996. Samurai Showdown 4. You don't ever hear a lot about Sam Show 4. You hear about how the second one is an all-time classic and that the third one was a letdown. Then people move on to 5 since it was the last one for the classic Neo Geo hardware and the most competitively viable. But man, Sam Show 4 is a hell of a game, and one of the first fighting games I sank a lot of quarters into. After all the nice arcades closed up shop, there were still a handful of not-so-nice ones left. One of those not-so-nice arcades had a cabinet for Samurai Showdown 4. Out of all the games there, this one commanded my attention more than any of the others. If you're a fan of Samurai Showdown, then this game has a little bit of everything for you. The graphics aren't nearly as dark as the third entry, but the crazy gore and fatality finishers have remained. Mechanically, it is very solid and feels like classic Sam Show. Among other series changes, aerial blocking was removed entirely. You also can't charge your POW gauge. The off-screen delivery man was removed entirely from this game. However, they added the CD combo system, where a player can press the C and D buttons together, triggering a strike that can be followed up by a sequence of button taps for crazy damage. SNK also added a suicide move, where you can forfeit one round. The bonus to this is that the one committing suicide will start the next round with a full super meter. Certain finishers also enable a fatality move in the vein of Mortal Kombat. You can also enter rage mode when your meter is full up by hitting A, B, and C to do a tremendous amount more damage, but be careful, if you do this, then you'll lose access to your super meter. This would be the last Samurai Showdown on the original Neo Geo hardware until 2003. Quite the gap. I still have a ton of nostalgia for this game, and I just think the aesthetics of it are so damn cool. There is an edginess to this game that doesn't go into the ridiculous self-parody that the third game went into, which is a pretty darn hard thing to do. So overall, I really recommend you give this game a shot. It's included in the Samurai Showdown Anthology Collection, available pretty much everywhere. Winner, Retro Remy's Heart. Art of Fighting 3. Art of Fighting was one of those fighting game franchises I learned to avoid in the arcades. Specifically the first game. By the time I got to it, other than the nifty scaling effects, the game just felt like a poor man's Street Fighter 2 in every way. Of course, it seemed like every arcade that had a Neo Geo cabinet in it seemed to have the original Art of Fighting in it. Thank God they could hold 4 games. Art of Fighting 3, though, this was a totally different animal. One of my local arcades had this game inside a cabinet with the original Art of Fighting, and I think bowling and golf? Always bowling and golf. But to be honest, I just couldn't wrap my head around this game when I was a kid. It is an extremely unique fighter. Art of Fighting 3 features really eye-catching rotoscope graphics that utilized live-action filming to accomplish this really cool look. The game also features dynamic lighting across the stages based on the time of day and the weather, and these things change as the matches go on. It's all really cool stuff. I think really graphically, the only thing that you could hold against this game at the time was that it wasn't blocky-ass polygons. People did hold that against it for sure, too. Coming out in 1996, going up against Tekken 2 and Virtua Fighter 3, as amazing as these sprites looked, nobody cared in 1996. Like in the previous 2 games, the Spirit system makes a return. I barely understand this mechanic, but I will do my best here. Spirit decreases when you use special moves, but can be recovered by not getting hit and keeping away from your opponent. You can also try to bait your opponent by taunting them, which takes a hammer to their spirit meter. Besides normal punches, kicks, and throws, each character has several death blow moves. Death blows deplete a portion of your spirit gauge. If the spirit level drops below green, death blows become sort of useless. You can charge spirit by standing in place too, but you will get knocked in your face if you do this. This game also has a sort of fatality system with the ultimate KO, where you can end a fight with certain moves if your opponent has 10% or less life. Despite how cool this game looks, the gameplay just never really jived with me. I've played this game at the arcade, on the PS2 Art of Fighting anthology, and again on a Neo Geo emulator for this video. The spirit meter system just feels strange and bad. Like a pair of jeans that are too tight. I don't want to constantly look at my meter to see if I can throw an uppercut. I want to just throw the damn uppercut. Also, not engaging with your opponent in order to build meter back sucks. It's just bad game design. Players hate this lame shit, so I don't know what they were thinking. There doesn't seem to be all that much of an online scene for this game, but I was able to find some high-level play, so if you look hard enough, you can probably find someone to play with. The last thing we should talk about is that this game was a financial bomb for SNK. Both this and Fatal Fury underperformed for them in the same time period. Given how expensive this game was to produce, this was seen as a giant loss at the time. Since everything that wasn't KOF was underperforming horribly, it isn't that shocking that we would see a consolidation from SNK in the coming years into being essentially the King of Fighters and Metal Slug company that occasionally made other games. Winner, biggest financial disappointment for SNK. Breakers. I love Breakers. This game has so much nostalgia for me, and even better, the game still plays like a retro dream. I was introduced to this game in college. This was around the time Street Fighter 4 was popping off big time, and in between heated Zangief and Cammy sets, we would play Breakers and Breakers Revenge on a laptop hooked up to a projector. Was there some lag? Yeah. Did it matter? Not at all. Because, my friends, Breakers is a poverty classic unlike any other, and I will heartily recommend this game to you any and every day of the week. It plays pretty much identically to Street Fighter. You could even call it a clone, and will immediately notice a lot of the same archetypes from Street Fighter are present here too, but I don't mind that. It's also never been easier to play this game, as they just released the Breakers collection. I haven't tried out that version yet, but if it's like the other Neo Geo re-releases, it will be spot on. I love this game, I just can't recommend it enough. I don't really have a lot to say about it. It's just a tremendous treat to come back to this game, and winner, best poverty fighter. Dead or alive. Man, what a pleasant surprise this game turned out to be. I had near subterranean expectations for this game. DOA has essentially been infamous as a titty game for a long time now. I have never played the original game before this video. I honestly haven't touched one of these games since 4, but now is as good a time to any to see if this game is actually any good. You know what? It is! The game came out before the entire focus of the game became questionable boob physics and skimpy outfits. Both of these things are still present, but they are just way dialed down in this game. I guess not being able to sell bikini DLC really impacted their game design philosophy. The game feels like a smoother version of the original Virtua Fighter, with a punch, a kick, and a block button that also doubles as a universal counter move. It's fluid and fast, and landing counters is incredibly satisfying. I could take or leave the mechanic where if your opponent lands out of the ring, they explode. It is kind of funny at a minimum. The Model 2 version you are seeing here looks solid. It is unfortunately another 2.5D fighter or pseudo 3D fighter. But to be honest, I minded it the least out of all of the fake 3D fighting games I've played. High praise, I know, but this game fakes 3D the best out of all of them that I have played. But the real star of the show is the impeccable Saturn port. The game runs on the Virtua Fighter 2 engine and it looks incredible. No polygon pop-in, no slowdown. The game just runs like a dream and shows what the Saturn was truly capable of as a 3D machine. I can't say that this is my favorite game of 1996 or anything like that, but I can say without reservation that this is the best pseudo 3D fighter I've played yet. Winner, best pseudo 3D fighting game. Battle Arena Toshinden. Well, we finally got here, friends. I really wish we hadn't, but we're here. Battle Arena Toshinden is unfortunately a historically significant game, being the first game with some kind of evasion mechanic in a 3D fighter, but we will get to how good of a job they did with that in due time. The original Battle Arena came out in 1995 for the PlayStation. It was a huge success and featured prominently in the launch ads. People were mesmerized by a decent-looking polygonal fighter at the time. Battle Arena fit the bill and blew the original Virtua Fighter for the Saturn out of the water graphically. The gameplay is another matter entirely. Graphically, these days it's a bit more touch and go. The game has held up poorly, like most of these early polygonal fighters. So, the biggest saving grace of the game has evaporated, but perhaps it has aged better in other areas. Yeah, not so much. Remember the highly vaunted sidestep? Well, it's more of a roll than a true sidestep. It's slow and a little awkward to use every time. It can sometimes be an effective dodge from an attack, but you are just as likely to get nailed for your efforts as well. 1996 would see the release of 2 of these games, unfortunately. The second game for the PlayStation, and a port of the original titled Ultimate Revenge Attack for the Sega Saturn. Here are both games. The Saturn version is noticeably uglier than the original and its sequel on the PlayStation. But if we're being honest, both games look pretty darn ugly these days. I actually prefer how the Saturn version plays compared to the first 2 on the PlayStation. Doesn't feel what I would call good, but it is more tolerable. Sega was evidently directly involved with this port and considered it a big deal at the time. Hilarious in retrospect. Not sure what they thought an uglier port of a PlayStation launch game was going to do for the Saturn's fortunes, but here we are. Winner of the I never want to play these games again award. Well, friends, that was 1996. There were a few games that I cut out for time, but I think I hit all of the highlights. If there was anything that I missed, be sure to let me know in the comments. If you would like to see 1997 featured this way, please like and subscribe and let me know. These videos take a ton of work to make. I enjoy doing it, but I want to make sure that you do too before I keep going. Thank you for joining me on this adventure. This has been Retro Remy. Take it easy, friends.